Chapter 22.
Now Moroni didn't stop preparing for war or to defend his people against the Lamanite. Indeed, at the start of the 20th year of the judge's rule, he had his armies begin to dig up piles of earth around the outside of all the cities throughout the Nephite lands. On top of those ridges of earth around the outside of the cities, he had walls of timbers erected to the height of a man. He had a frame of pointed stakes built upon those walls of timbers around the outside of them, and they were strong and high. And he built towers overlooking those pickets, and he had reinforced shelters on top of the towers, so the Lamanite stones and arrows couldn't hurt them. They were prepared to throw stones from the top of them at selected targets, using their arm strength to kill anyone who might attempt to approach the city walls. In this way, Moroni prepared strongholds around the outside of every city in the whole land, in anticipation of their enemies' arrival. Then Moroni had his armies enter the eastern wilderness. And they went out and drove all the Lamanite who were in the eastern wilderness into their own lands, which were south of the land of Zarahemla. The land of Nephi ran in a straight line from the eastern sea to the west. When Moroni had driven all the Lamanite from the eastern wilderness, which was north of their own lands, he made the inhabitants who were in the land of Zarahemla and in the surrounding regions go into the eastern wilderness all the way to the shoreline and occupy the land. And he also placed armies to the south in the borders of their own lands and had them erect fortifications so they could guard their armies and their people from their enemies. In this way he cut off all the Lamanite strongholds in the eastern wilderness, and also to the west, fortifying the line between the Nephite and Lamanite, between the land of Zarahemla and the land of Nephi, from the western sea running by the head of the Sidon River, the Nephite occupying all the land to the north, indeed, all the land to the north of the land of Bountiful, as they saw fit. So Moroni with his armies, which increased daily because of the confidence in the protection his planning gave them, attempted to take away the Lamanite ability to invade their lands. This was to prevent the Lamanite from gaining any power over their lands. The Nephite began to build a city, and they called the city Moroni. It was by the eastern sea, and it was south, bordering the Lamanite frontier. And they also began building a city between the cities of Moroni and Aaron, along the same border as Aaron and Moroni, and they called the name of that city and surrounding area Nephia. During that same year, they also began building many other cities in the north, one in a particular design they called Lehi, which was to the north near the seashore. And so ended the 20th year. And at the beginning of the 21st year of the judge's rule over the Nephite found themselves prospering. In fact, they were very prosperous, and they became very rich. They increased in population and became strong in the land. Now we can see how merciful, fair, and true all the Lord's dealings are, fulfilling all his words for the benefit of mankind. We can see, even at this time, the words he spoke to Lehi are verified, saying, "Blessed are you, and your children as well. And they will be blessed. To the extent you keep God's commandments, you will prosper in the land, and to the extent you don't keep God's commandments, you will be cut off from his presence." So we see these promises were kept for the Nephite, because it has been their quarrels and conflicts, their murders and thievery, their idol worship and whoredoms, and the abominations of the people that brought upon them armed conflict and destruction. Those who were faithful in keeping the Lord's commandments were protected and saved every time, while thousands of their wicked fellow Nephite have been condemned to slavery or to die by the sword or to fall away in unbelief and mix with the Lamanite. But there never was a happier time among the Nephites since Nephi's days than during Moroni's days, indeed, during the 21st year of the judge's rule. And the 22nd year of the judge's rule also ended in peace, and the 23rd year as well. At the start of the 24th year of the judge's rule, there also would have been peace among the Nephite if it hadn't been for a conflict that arose regarding the land of Lehi and the land of Morianton, which adjoined the borders of Lehi, both of which bordered the seashore. The dispute came about because the people who lived in the land of Morianton claimed part of the land of Lehi. So a heated conflict arose between them, to the point that the people of Morianton armed themselves to fight their fellow Nephite, being determined to kill them with the sword. But the people who lived in the land of Lehi fled to Moroni's camp and appealed to him for assistance. They did this because they weren't in the wrong. When the people of Morianton, who were led by a man named Morianton, discovered the people of Lehi had fled to Moroni's camp, they were very afraid that Moroni's army would attack and kill them. So Morianton gave them the idea to flee northward, to the land covered with large bodies of water, and take the land to the north as their own. They would have put this plan into effect, which would have been a matter of deep concern, but Morianton was a man of uncontrollable anger, and he got angry with one of his female servants and assaulted and severely beat her. She fled and went to Moroni's camp and told Moroni everything about the events and about their intention to flee to the north. Now the people of Bountiful, or rather Moroni was afraid the people of Bountiful, would listen to Morianton and unite with his people. That would result in him gaining control of those parts of the land, which would lead to serious consequences among the Nephite, consequences that would lead to the loss of their liberty. Therefore Moroni sent an armed force to get ahead of Morianton's people, to stop their departure into the land to the north. But they didn't get ahead of them until they had arrived at the border of the land of desolation. They confronted them by the narrow pass beside the sea into the land to the north, between the sea on the west and on the east. And the army sent by Moroni, which was led by a man named Teancum, met Morianton's people. And Morianton's people, being influenced by his wickedness and persuasion, were so stubborn that a battle began, in which Teancum killed Morianton and defeated his army and took them prisoner and returned to Moroni's camp. And so ended the 24th year of the judge's rule over the Nephite. This was how the people of Morianton were brought back. Once they covenanted to keep the peace, the land of Morianton was given back to them. And a general agreement was reached between them and the people of Lehi, and their lands were also given back to them. In the same year that peace was restored among the Nephite, Nephihah the second chief judge died, having occupied the judgment seat with perfect uprightness before God. Nevertheless, he had declined Alma's offer to take responsibility for those records and those things that Alma and his fathers considered most sacred. Therefore Alma had conferred them upon his son Helaman. Nephihah's son was appointed to fill the judgment seat in his father's place. He was appointed chief judge and governor over the people, with an oath and sacred ordinance to judge righteously, and to keep the peace and freedom of the people, and to grant them their sacred privileges to worship the Lord who is God, to support and maintain the cause of God while he ruled, and to bring the wicked to justice according to their crimes. Now his name was Pararon. Pararon occupied his father's seat and began his rule over the Nephite at the end of the 24th year.